Did you see what Greg Sankey said? He's just so wrong.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. Are we overlooking K-State in the Big 12 title run? And something I'm tired of hearing with regards to Florida and Oklahoma both going into this season. But we start with Greg Sankey. I don't know where this quote even came from. It just kind of popped into my head. There's some like poem, book, movie line, whatever, where someone says, "Oh, let me explain the ways in which I love thee," or something like that. And I wanted to make my own version for Greg Sankey, who was speaking publicly not long ago on the state of college athletics. "Oh, let me explain to thee the ways in which thee are wrong." So the most hilarious quote that came from the SEC commissioner was, quote, "I don't need lectures from others about the good of the game or coordinating press releases about the good of the game." Yeah. Actually, Greg, you do. You clearly do. He was very defensive. You should go watch the full press conference. But Greg Sankey was very defensive as the SEC commissioner. Like, "Oh, why am I the bad guy? What did I do?" He's just personifying the hot dog meme with Tim. I think it's Tim Robinson. "We're all trying to find the guy who did this." Gee, how did we get here? How did we get here, Greg? How did we get into a chaotic situation? How? Is it a giant mystery? No, it's not. I'm not saying you weren't doing your job, acting in the best interest of the conference that you are governing and the presidents who you work for. I just get tired of this notion that we're supposed to believe, oh, well, Greg said he wasn't doing anything wrong, or that, he's got the best interest of the sport in mind. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. This is how he was talking about playoff expansion. "Oh, I didn't think we needed to go to 12 teams. Oh, goodness. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'm glad somebody sees it. I mean, I was here beating that drum saying, "Oh, we don't need to do this. College football's okay. You could go to 6. You could go to 8. You don't need 12. But we're going to go to 16, of course." And so this leads me to the next point that I wanted to discuss. Because, of course, the SEC has been acting in this space in a way that's led us to this point of chaotic, know-nothing, uncertainty, weird future, shifting power dynamics, power vacuums, all this stuff. The SEC played a pretty big role. And Greg Sankey's been right there the entire time. Like, I'm sorry, Greg, you say whatever you want publicly, but we all see through it. We all see through it. Now, according to Brandon Marcello and others, the ACC and the Big 12 presented and endorsed a 5+11 CFP format with 5 automatic qualifiers and 11 at-large spots. Yeah. Do you think the conference... Look, I applaud the Big 12 and ACC for making something that'd be better. I think it was Lane Kiffin who recently said, look at this, I'm about to agree with Lane Kiffin. He said we should just put in the 16 best teams, no automatic qualifiers, nothing, just put in the 16 highest ranked teams. Yep, I'm so on board. So on board. I heard Joel Klatt the other day saying, "I don't want to give the committee more power." I don't know if that was a good Joel Klatt impression or not. I don't want to give them. I want them to be as removed. I don't. I seriously don't. I want that committee to tell us who the 16 best teams are. If that's where we're going with this expanded playoff, which hasn't even been agreed upon yet. They're still discussing, figuring out formatting and all that good stuff. I would rather see the committee sort this out and pick the 16 teams rather than have automatic qualifiers. Because which one places a greater sense of urgency on regular season games. Joel was contradicting himself the other day because he's been a playoff expansionist for a while, and all of a sudden he was saying, well, we need to keep urgency in the regular season. Joel, I don't know that that's where your head has always been with regards to college football. But it's certainly not where the SEC's heads have been collectively, because they see, hey, we get a bunch of teams into the playoff. Hey, we can get a lot of money from those teams getting into the playoff, and that's what we've got. That's what we're going to continue to get. I applaud the Big 12 for saying, hey, how about every conference gets one, the 4 power conferences plus the group of 5, and then we do 11 at-large bids like that. Maybe this is a negotiating tactic. Maybe they're just trying to say, hey, you propose 4 auto bids for your conference, Big 10 and SEC. How about you get 1? Maybe that's a way to negotiate them down to 3 or 2. Obviously, you can't have a half bid in there, so those are the only options. Perhaps that's what they're seeking. And you know what? I hope they're successful. I hope they're successful. The reason I am in favor of the committee having the power to pick more at-large teams is because there is no gimmicky way or guarantee for a team to be in the playoff, to rest players for a particular game for any reason, because we don't know what the committee's going to think. You're just going to attack the 12 games on your schedule and say, yeah, we got to win as many as we possibly can so that the committee will give us a look, so that they will give us a chance. I would rather have that than a system where you have 4 automatic qualifiers in the Big 10 and 4 automatic qualifiers in the SEC. That's garbage. That's absolute, complete, utter garbage. And you are not making college football a better product. And in fact, I think you are making it worse by creating that sort of structure. I sense we'll go there because the SEC, who might not even want to be in the NCAA for very long, I don't know that anybody else, frankly, does either. But the idea that the SEC and the Big Ten should get twice as many bids seems like they're trying to hash this stuff out. I hope they do, in a way that makes college football better as a whole, not just for 2 particular leagues. There was a congressman, by the way, I forgot the guy's name, who basically threatened the Big Ten and the SEC saying, you need to figure this out in a way that's good for the whole sport, or you're going to be investigated for what you are doing for rigging this in your favor. And I was like, whoa, I keep politics out of this show, but when politics comes into college football, well, hey, maybe something could really happen there. That could get interesting too, because if suddenly the federal government is going to show down with the Big Ten and the SEC, not college football, just those 2 conferences, if that gets steam, boy, I could be talking about the legislative process here on Locked On College Football. Welcome to 2025 in the greatest sport on planet Earth. But I hope there is some solution. I think 5 automatic qualifiers for conference champions and 11 at-large, I'd vote for that. If that's the best situation we can get ourselves in with a 16-team playoff, which makes me want to throw up in my mouth, repulses me to my core, but when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, or lemon bars. Lemon bars also incredibly underrated dessert, incredibly underrated. A properly, or key lemon pie, like key lime pie, but with lemons, also very good. A properly made lemon bar is so phenomenal because it's tart but not bitter. It is sweet but not overly rich. It's kind of one of the perfect desserts out there. So when you get lemons, make lemonade or lemon bars. That's what I'm trying to think about here with all of these playoff changes. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all of that good stuff. Let's go back to talking about football. Let's go back. That's what I enjoy most. The other stuff is kind of fun. We might be overlooking Kansas State. First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And if you want to bet college football, which you might because you're listening to or watching this show, FanDuel's the way to do it. You have got win totals, you have got conference title odds, you've got national championship odds, Heisman odds, even individual games can be wagered upon over at FanDuel. And you can get a $200 bonus bet or bonus bets, depending on how you choose to spend it if your first $5 bet hits. So if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Are we overlooking Kansas State in the Big 12? Not if you check the odds over at FanDuel, of course. There's currently a four-way tie for the betting favorite. The Wildcats are in there, Baylor, Arizona State, and Texas Tech. So where should Kansas State fall? Christian Rauh of Locked On Kansas State is here to discuss just that. So do you think that's right? Christian, would you, if you were setting at Christian Sportsbook, the Big 12 championship odds, would you have a four-way tie, and where would you rank Kansas State?
Well, first off, that would sound like a pretty religious type of betting site right there. Maybe I should change that name. But overall, yeah, I mean, four-way tie. Look, it's tough to weed out who's going to be at the top of the Big 12, who's going to be at the bottom. If you look at any type of power conference, it's the parity is insane. I mean, look what happened last year with Arizona State. No one expected them to be there. In 2022, when TCU went to the national championship, the media poll, they had them ranked 7th. That was the year Kansas State won the Big 12 championship, let I remind you. But Kansas State is going to be the top of the Big 12. They are going to be one of the teams that finish off heading up, fighting for Dr. Pepper. It will happen, Spencer, and I'm going to put that out on record. Now, I've also gone on record, thought it was going to be BYU. Now, that might change just a little bit after what has been going on in the recent type of headlines. But Kansas State is going to be overlooked heading into the new year, and I think it'll be easily taken away fast after they take care of Iowa State and Dublin. But when you have a 7-1 start last year, and then when the wheels fall off at not a tough team, but a Houston team, like the wheels fell off against Houston, Spencer, that was a bad time for the wheels to fall off. A lot of people are going to start throwing that hate towards guys like Avery Johnson, saying he doesn't have what it takes to be a Big 12 quarterback. So not only are they going to be overlooked, they're going to have chips on their shoulder. The retention is so high of this team. Momentum's never been stronger, in my personal opinion. And I think they're going to make a lot of people eat their words and potentially lose their checkbooks if they go ahead and bet against them with our friends over at FanDuel.
The reason that I frame the discussion that way of them being overlooked, even though they're tied for the best odds in the Big 12, is there's nothing for, I think, casual college football fans or even engaged ones to latch onto with Kansas State. It's just kind of, they're good. It reminds me very much of a team that's closer to the top of the Big 12 title odds than you might expect, Utah, in the old Pac-12, RIP, where they're just steady, just solid. They're just good every single year. They're always there. They're in the mix. And it feels like a breakthrough, which certainly came a couple of years ago, is bound to happen again. But you look at what the rest of the top of the Big 12 kind of looks like. Arizona State, big momentum, story of the year in the conference, winning the league, reigning champs. They've got recruiting momentum. Texas Tech has got a bunch of money going into the program. They've got a top 5 national transfer portal class. Like, that's an easy thing to get to. And I mean, frankly, I'm surprised Baylor is that high. I think that's a bit of an overreaction. I would put Kansas State above them if I were to make Big 12 power rankings. But do you think that's the reason? Is Kansas State isn't always the noisiest program, which isn't a bad thing. But they're not always the noisy. They're not always giving people a reason to pay attention to what's happening in Manhattan.
Yeah, it's one of those spots where you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, I guess. And I think you are a spot where you're not talked about enough. But even when you won the Big 12 championship in 2022, they were completely forgot about. It went right to TCU yet again. Max Duggan's story. It wasn't ever about everything that happened with Kansas State. So yeah, they're easily forgotten, but doesn't mean they're a good program. Chris Kleiman has done a great job taking over for Bill Snyder, and it's just continued on this great legacy for this a very long time. Kansas State has had good football for a very long time. And they get to continue that this year. Now, look, when you talk about some of those other teams, you talk about Arizona State, who has recruiting momentum. I would argue that Kansas State has just as much recruiting momentum. They've had probably one of the best recruiting classes in program history this past season, and they most definitely had, and I apologize in advance since you are a Locked On Oregon fan, they brought in Lincoln Cure, which is their top recruit in program history. So there's a lot of interesting things happening. That's why I keep saying the momentum has never been stronger with this program. Yes, they had a terrible bowl game last year where they had to face Rutgers in the Ray Bowl. After starting 7-1, you didn't want that to happen. You wanted to go to the college football playoffs. You wanted to go in the Big 12 championship. You wanted to have those type of things to hang your shoulder on heading into this new year. But Avery Johnson and the rest of that team made the most of it. They had a great comeback win against Rutgers. They had the recruiting class. Retention was super strong, something that they did not expect to happen, at least in my mind I didn't, after the wheels falling off towards the end of the season. And although some of these recruiting rankings have Kansas State super low on the recruiting rankings, a lot of these players are going to be really good players right away. JB Nelson from Penn State, he's going to be a day one offensive lineman that is probably going to be an NFL draft pick, top 100 draft pick next season.
So talk more about this Kansas State roster, because I think you have some good ones to contend with in the Big 12. I don't think there's a world beater in this conference. I think that on paper, you probably give the edge to Texas Tech. I think Arizona State certainly deserves to be in the fold, but nobody had a better offseason than Texas Tech. Like they have won the Big 12 offseason, and for whatever that is worth, and I don't think it's ever a bad thing to be a program that's committed to winning. I know, hot take. It's okay, even if it doesn't work out every single time. Where would you stack up K-State's roster in relation to the rest of the league?
Well, turns out U.S. dollar is not actually paper. So when you're looking at teams on paper, I don't know if you should look at Texas Tech, because that is a team that has spent a lot of money, no doubt. But I know we're a football show here, but if you want to look at the basketball program of Kansas State, spending money does not mean absolutely anything at all.
No, but they're going and spending it again.
But they're going to do it again. And
because of what? You got no other option. What else are you going to do? Not spend it?
You're 100% right. And you can't take it with you when you go. I've heard that. I think that was a country song. I'm sure it is. If not, I'm sure someone's going to write it.
I think there are a couple hundred.
Probably about a truck too. And, when I applaud Texas Tech for doing what they're doing, it's helping put the Big 12 on the map, especially in this uncertainty portion of what's going on with Greg Sankey and his lying ways. But Kansas State, I think that they're in a really good position. When I look at this roster right now and I talk about the momentum, last year Avery Johnson struggled at times. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat that. He had some moments where he was trying to take over from not only just being the new quarterback of Kansas State, but he had to be that quarterback that was not Will Howard, that was not Adrian Martinez. He had to take over Chris Kleiman's offense, and he had to do it with another new offensive coordinator, and it was a dueling head offensive coordinators between Connor Riley and Matt Wells. Now, Matt Wells is the only guy in charge. He is the only offensive coordinator, a guy that has great experience with quarterbacks in the past, Jordan Love being the main attraction to that conversation, does a really good job of play action with Love at Utah State. I think he can excel Avery Johnson into that aspect. I also think last year they had a subpar wide receiver group, and I think they really attacked that great in the portal. They might not have added the top names that you might see like other programs going after, but they added a certain trait, that's something that Kansas State hasn't had in quite some time, and really maybe ever. Size. They went after size. Jared Bradley, Jaron Tips, both 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". They're big dudes. And you add that to a tight end room that led the entire country in red zone touchdowns last year, you're a dangerous threat for Avery Johnson. And if you have some potential throwing accuracy issues like you did in year one, well, that room for error might grow a little bit if you have a 6'5" wide receiver going ahead in that catching radius for your target shares. So I like where this offense is heading, Spencer. I like Dylan Edwards as my running back one because I think he's absolutely explosive. Jace Brown, I think, is a unit as well. I think he's an absolute dog. And although there's a lot of new players on this offensive line, I think they brought in some really interesting players that can be, NFL type material right away. JB Nelson's one of them that I look at from an immediate standpoint. Kansas State has always found a way to have a good offensive line, even if you're not talking about them. I mean, one of them is the starting center for the Dallas Cowboys right now. There's a lot of interesting things for Kansas State's offense. That will be the main attraction, though. If their offense can continue to do what they couldn't do towards the end of the season last year, if Avery Johnson can take that step forward in 2025, be the year 2 quarterback that he needs to be, not the fresh year 1 guy that's replacing Will Howard, Kansas State will be at the top of this conference.
Real quick, before I let you go, Christian, I say Avery Johnson, Heisman finalist. You say what?
I say dark horse and absolutely.
That is the right answer from Locked On Kansas State host Christian Rauh. Great stuff, my man. Oklahoma and Florida have these schedules. They're really hard. They're incredibly hard, and I really don't want to hear it. So if you've heard about Florida and Oklahoma going into the 2025 season, what you've probably heard at some point, and maybe this is the first time, their schedules are really hard. Man, it's tough. It's brutal. They've got gauntlet schedules in the SEC. I mean, whoa, are they tough? S&P Plus, by the way, rates their schedules as the first and second hardest in the country. Oklahoma the toughest and Florida the second toughest in all of college football. And it's, oh my gosh, well, the expectations should be tempered because of this. I think that's fair to an extent. To an extent. Not to the extent I usually see the discourse surrounding these programs, because here's how I always hear these conversations. Let's take Florida, for instance. Make no mistake about it. I'm not trying to sit here and tell you these are actually easy schedules. I think Florida's is slightly more manageable than Oklahoma's, but that doesn't mean that the Sooners is easy. It's not. Florida goes LIU, South Florida. Okay. At LSU, at Miami in back-to-back weeks. Pretty tough. A split there would be good. Texas at home, at Texas A&M, Mississippi State at home, Georgia in Jacksonville, of course, in a neutral site, at Kentucky, at Ole Miss, Tennessee, Florida State. It's a tough schedule. It's a tough schedule. No doubt about it. I am really tired, particularly with Florida, that's been in the SEC my entire life. I'm really tired of hearing this Florida has to play and Florida has to do. Whatever happened to all of those teams have to play Florida? Where did that version of Florida go? Where exactly? I saw Andy Staples, I think, over at On3, pick Florida to make the college football playoff. I don't think that's insane from an expectation standpoint. If you're the Gators, I really, really hope that fans in Gainesville and my guy Brandon Olson over at Locked On Gators looks at a schedule like this and says those teams got to play Florida. That's how it should be viewed. If a program is being run correctly that has the ceiling of the Florida Gators, that's one of the 5 best jobs in all of college football. It might not be outside the top 3. Fan support, location, history, you got a lot of things going for you there. A lot of things going for you. And in this framing of the discussion, oh, it's so brutal. Oh, look who they have to play. If you see Florida's schedule through that lens, that means whoever is in charge is not doing the job correctly. Because all those other teams should see Florida on their schedule and think, ooh, we got to play Florida. Boy, that's going to be tough. If the Gators go 9-3 this year, I'd call that a success. I'm not unreasonable. I'm not saying you should be going 11-1, 12-0. No, there are a lot of good teams on there. There's some tough games. Back-to-back weeks early in the season at LSU and at Miami. That's tough. That's tough. You should be able to win one of those games. I don't expect you to win 2. When I do my team schedule prediction or record predictions this year, I'll probably pick Florida to win one of those games at most. If you split with the Texas schools, you're doing well. And then between Georgia, Ole Miss, and Tennessee, if Florida is being run correctly when you've been there for several years, if you're recruiting properly, if you're developing properly, if you're going out of the field and executing from a coaching standpoint, the way you're supposed to, Florida should be able to win several of those games. And a good year should look like 9-3, and they should be in the playoff discussion as Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina were a season ago. Does that mean they make it? No, it does not. Does it mean I think they should? No. It also does not, because I'm someone who values the regular season. I want the wins and losses to actually matter. But, of course, that's a much longer conversation in there. I feel this way about Oklahoma, but to like a 60% extent, because there's still a new kid on the block. This isn't Lincoln Riley's Oklahoma. This isn't Bob Stoops' Oklahoma, to be sure. The old school Oklahoma teams that, got to national championship games or were in that discussion year in and year out, compared to the new school ones, there's a different feel there, right? There's a shift. Stoops a little bit more of a defensive guy, Lincoln Riley more of an offensive guy, Venables trying to go back to, emphasizing the defensive side of the ball. Their defense should be really good this year. But Oklahoma's schedule on the back half is absolutely brutal. You have Red River on October 11th, and then there's just no easy game on the schedule. At South Carolina, host Ole Miss. At Tennessee, at Alabama, host Missouri, host LSU. To a lesser extent, not the same. Not the same, because I think when you go into a new conference, and this is just going to be year 2 for the Sooners and the Longhorns playing in the SEC, then year 2, is that where we're at? I don't even know. Time just blends together at this point. I do believe you should have a similar mindset of they've got to play us. Oklahoma shouldn't look at the schedule and think 6-6 is okay. If Brent Venables scrapes by getting to a bowl game and just gets there and it's like, it's a whatever bowl game and is not even close to being in the playoff discussion, he should be on the hot seat going into 2026. He should. Billy Napier, same discussion. If it's a 6-6, 5-7 sort of year, I'm not just chalking that up to, they had a tough schedule. Yeah, but you're Florida. You're Oklahoma. You don't roll over. You don't say, we can't possibly compete with those programs. Why? What are you missing? What do you need? What do you not have at either of those places that the programs you're going up against that you look at and go, can't be expected to win a lot of those games? How many programs on paper are better positioned than Florida and Oklahoma? They both play Texas. I think that's a fair point. You want to argue that? I think that's totally fair. Alabama is on Oklahoma's schedule. They beat them last year, by the way, so don't tell me it can't be done. They have to go to Tuscaloosa. That's going to be significantly tougher. But what exactly do they have? What have they shown? Why should there be such a huge gap for all of these teams? There shouldn't be. There shouldn't be. And so, yes, you can bring the expectations down a hair. I just don't want to look at either of these teams at the end of the year and watch them go 7-5 and then say, really, they were much better than that. No, if either one of these teams with these hard schedules go 7-5, that's not maximizing their potential. That's not having the sort of program that you are capable of running as a head coach, whether you are Brent Venables or whether you are Billy Napier. So I wanted to express that thought today because S&P rates them as the 2 toughest schedules. I get it. There's a reason for that. There's plenty of good reason behind it. But it's Florida and Oklahoma. We're not talking about Kent State and McNeese. This is Gators and the Sooners. Figure it out. That's my optimistic message to those programs. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.